Gettysburg Seminary presents the Seminary Explores podcast. Conversations on faith, art, people, politics, theology, life, and more, with voices from around the corner and around the globe.
Good day. Welcome to the Seminary Explorers.
Thank you.
And I'd like to introduce our guest, Dr. Vincent Evener, who is the visiting instructor in Reformation and Lutheran Studies here at Gettysburg Seminary. And you're here because for our annual edition of the 10 Top Stories in Religion.
Yes.
Okay. And so without any further delay, I'm going to ask you, what is your first story that you want to share?
Well, I guess first a caveat. This comes from a certain perspective, that is to say, very much they're oriented towards Christianity, and coming from someone who's living in the United States of America. That's perhaps obvious to say, but unfortunately I'm not qualified to tell you what the top 10 stories would be if I were Hindu.
Right, exactly.
At the same time, I think every story that I found or that I came up with really implicates how we live with others, and particularly we'll see a lot of stories about how Christians, Jews, Muslims must face the future together. Yeah,
and certainly that is in the news.
Yes.
In terms of how we live together as in these United States. Very much so.
Yes, but my first one, number 10, although this isn't really a ranking,
okay.
I have to say, saying which story is more important than the other seemed impossible. Number 10, a story that really struck me was the story of Kelly Giesendanner and her friendship with Jürgen Moltmann leading up to her execution. So if you're familiar with the story...
Share that with the...
Well, she was convicted of recruiting her boyfriend to murder her husband.
Right.
I believe she confessed, but in any case, she was found guilty.
Right.
Put on death row, and then eventually came to participate in a prison theology program and earn a theology degree. She became a pen pal with Jürgen Moltmann, the famous theologian.
Wow. Okay,
and there was a very long saga. From the spring is when I first heard of the story, leading up to she was fined. They refused to stay her execution, and she was finally executed in September after many different appeals.
Now, very often we hear about prisoners who reform or who turn to a religious tradition, and but we seldom hear of those who really study theology.
Right. Well, that's why I like the story, because I mean it's not only not only focuses us on the power of Christianity to transform a life, but on the power of theology very directly, and the power of study to change a life.
Exactly.
And at the same time, it raises very, fundamental questions for society, of course.
And certainly for, in particular, the Christian community, when we talk about this ongoing lifelong learning, lifelong catechesis, etc.
Right.
That really says something.
Well, and a lot of her defenders were pointing out that, she had changed. The execution should be put off, canceled, I guess, for lack of a better word, because she was a different person. She, the system freezes her in time, but she had become somebody different, and that was really the crux of the argument.
Okay, very, very interesting. Number 10. Okay.
We're off to an okay start then.
Oh, I think so. For you, number 9.
I have the Pope's visit to the United States.
Okay, yes.
And there are two interesting things for me about this story. Mm-hmm. One, it's the reception that Pope received. The fanfare that just shows how much hunger there is, for a Pope, really for a Christianity that cares about the poor, the afflicted, the outcast. To me, that was the big part of this
right,
story.
And the other piece is that it was not his presence not only affected other Roman Catholics, but in a sense brought a potpourri of people together to think or even to share. I have friends who are not Roman Catholic who were there to at the parade in Philadelphia, who were at the Mass, etc., to hear this phenomenal person.
Right. The energy surrounding him is extraordinary.
Exactly.
And it strikes me as, I don't know what I really want to say about this, but I guess I'll go ahead and say it anyway.
Please
since
say
I started. It's very interesting to, he's such this figure for Christianity, and you constantly would see, him doing something on climate change. That will come up later. And then the ELCA issues a statement on climate change. He's in such a position to be a leading figure for Christianity, and there seems to be a need for that. It definitely seems to be a need for that, even among denominations, Christians who don't have that figure.
Exactly. So, in some ways, he becomes an ecumenical figure,
right?
That I had not thought about before, but certainly a leader of the faith or of faiths or denominational.
Well, an ecumenical leader for as long as he remains ecumenical.
Well, that's true, and one never knows.
One never knows exactly.
But I think he was seen by just a cross section of the American people, and struck a chord. With these people.
I think so.
Yeah.
And then there was the flip side of that story was the canonization of Junipero Serra, the Franciscan missionary.
Yes.
And the objection to that canonization by Native American communities.
What did that say to you?
To me, it raises a fundamental, a fundamental question. Everything on here raises a fundamental question for me. It's from the church's perspective, how do we confront the evils of the past? And it's not just a Catholic problem. We have our problem with Luther and his anti-Judaism and his various other antis and problems. This is. What do you do with saints, mm-hmm. When they're, not perfect people? Or when, in Junipero Serra's case, caught up in these massive systemic evils, Mm-hmm. What do you do with that? Can you honor their legacy in a way that isn't offensive? Or how do you honor, that isn't offensive, that isn't divisive? And how do you honor in a way that represents
the tradition or the Christian life, and at the same time to know that in some sense these saints are saints and sinners.
Right. Well, you can. If being a sinner disqualifies you, you can never have saints.
Exactly.
You can never have heroes, and that's it's an important question to face. I think.
And one that certainly was raised by this canonization.
Yeah, which probably should have been handled differently. It probably could have been handled differently by going to some of the communities that were infected. This papacy, vis-a-vis a lot of others, has done an important job at engaging in interreligious dialogue.
Right.
And engaging in conversation. But, in this case, that did not occur.
Right.
In the way it should have, or with the same prominence that it should have.
Okay, good. Well, number 8.
Well, you've invited a Reformation historian, so I have to note the continued progress in Lutheran Catholic dialogue. Marked by the recent declaration on October 30th on church ministry and the Eucharist.
Okay. Say something for our listening audience.
Again, what the stories means to me, it didn't make the same splash as Francis's visit, right?
Exactly.
I mean, how many Americans know that this occurred? But that's the beauty of being asked to do this task and being in an institution that asks us to be reflective. How big is this? How important? As a Reformation historian, I know something of the actual pain that accompanied the Catholic Protestant division. The 30 Years' War is long history, but this is a huge event. This is a huge event, and something much bigger than saying. It's one thing for the Catholics and the Lutherans and a whole bunch of other people to say we can get together,
right? We
can work on this social issue, and it's another thing in this case to say we can move closer, at least, to a real communion, a communion in the life of the Church itself. To me, that step includes the other one. Of course, we can work together on a social issue,
and we've done those things
because we've made this deeper communion, this deeper commitment, and that seems to me profoundly important.
Right. Okay. Very good. Very good. Number 7.
And also an interreligious one, grouped here, not according to importance, but I figured I would follow, an ecumenical story with an interfaith story. The recent statement, this occurred in early December, of several Orthodox rabbis on Christianity. They called Christianity, I have a quote here, no one who's taken my class will be surprised to know that I have a pile of notes in front of me. The rabbis called Christianity part of a divine plan in which God wants Jews and Christians to work together to redeem the world. We acknowledge that Christianity is neither an accident nor an error, but the willed divine outcome and gift to the nations.
That's a significant statement.
Yeah, and it comes only from, and particularly, there has been interfaith conversation with Reformed, with Reformed Judaism, and conservative, but for Orthodox to make a statement, that's a step further, or that seems to me a sort of major development.
Well, right, and it seems to me that that these statements, be it from Rome or from Orthodox Jews, etc., says something about the climate in which we live today.
Well, and that's very interesting because I think if I turn on cable news, I'm going to be confronted with a climate of division or hostility. I'm going to be told that that's what's going on, and it's easy to sort of give into that pessimism, and it's easy to look at Lutheran Roman Catholic dialogue or Christian Jewish dialogue and be pessimistic and say, so what? It's a statement.
Exactly.
It's a statement by about in the Orthodox case 30 rabbis. So what? But to me, it's the very existence of this desire to overcome these differences and to have to work together, to think about a future together, and to say something deeper than we can work together because what choice we have,
right?
But we can work together because we're all children of the same God,
right?
That's much deeper and much more hopeful for our future.
Exactly. Number 6.
6, the Supreme Court's legalization of same-sex marriage. It's not... Again, I didn't know where to rank this, and then I decided this isn't a ranking anyway, because I can't decide what's more important.
That's good.
It's a decision of a secular court, but it's a landmark decision in this national debate, and a debate within the church that has divided denomination against denomination. I think this has to be one of the most significant religious stories of 2015.
Very much so. For within the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, it has caused major major division for a number of congregations,
and continues to do so. If you read
very much
Elizabeth Eaton's statement in response to the decision, it acknowledges continuing division within the Lutheran Church,
which means that we need to continue to have conversation and dialogue, not only with those who agree with one side, but those from the other. How do we communicate, and how do we share, and how do we continue to do ministry?
Right, and it's noteworthy. 2015 also, for most Americans, probably flew more under the radar. The decision of the Presbyterian Church USA.
That's right, and that's a long process in their system.
Yeah, a very long process. See, reading about it, it seemed very complicated. But that to me seems one of the major stories.
Okay. Well, halfway down, number 5.
Okay. Yes, 5 and 4 are 2 stories of violence. And they're 2 stories of tragedy, and I think this was, quite inevitable. And I put them in the middle of the list because I don't think violence has the last word.
Okay.
And I don't. I just refuse. We must refuse to let violence have the last word. And if you notice in all of these, in the 2 stories I'm about to mention, and people probably know what they are already, or at least have some intimation. In the stories themselves, violence doesn't have the last word. It's the response that matters. And our response is an ongoing thing. So 5, the event that touched, Southern Seminary, and particularly very directly the shooting at Emmanuel African Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina.
Right.
But what comes from that, and I said that horrible tragedy, is finally, after all these years, the removal of the Confederate flag from the South Carolina State House, and a debate that, for all its flaws and failure to actually talk to each other, seems to be a specialty of American political debate.
Yes.
For all our failure to actually talk to each other, a conversation about symbols of hatred that was long overdue. So an instance where the response, I think.
Yeah, I think the nation was horrified by that, and Christian communities, and where churches are open,
right,
and where one comes to study the Word, and here's someone who was listening to the conversation, maybe participating, and then this violent act.
Right. Well, and that's it's a question for the church, and it's a question for everyone in terms of keeping welcome despite the possibility of harm to yourself.
Exactly.
And that's a real,
right, because we're within the church building is no guarantee.
Right.
That we are in this world.
Right.
And with all of its exciting times and difficult times.
Right.
Yeah. Number 4.
4, and again, as I said, unfortunately, a tragic story. But what I think would probably be number 1 in the eyes of most Americans, so I feel like I have to, mass violence carried out particularly in the name of Islam. It's been, I think, if you went to the street, and pulled people aside, what's the number 1 religious story of 2015? Terrorism, unfortunately.
Yep, that's very much so.
And I had to be reminded that the Charlie Hebdo shooting actually occurred at the beginning of 2015.
Oh yes, I was in France the week after it occurred, and so very much in the news. And most recently in France, they had a gathering in remembrance at Place de la République because of that.
Right.
Yeah. And it continues. I mean, it continued throughout 15. The mass violence.
It's dizzying. The murder of 21 Coptic Christians in Libya by ISIS militants. The attack on Garissa University in Kenya, which killed 148 people. Of course, we recently think of horrific attacks in Paris, of San Bernardino. But again, what I would, what's maybe important to think about, I don't know exactly how to phrase it, the response. Right. What happens after San Bernardino? Yes. We hear the New York Daily News with its headline, "God isn't fixing this." Mm-hmm. That's an immediate backlash. You liberals are attacking religion. A call from Donald Trump for a ban on Muslim immigration. An attempt to show solidarity with Muslims by donning the hijab. Someone pointing out that the hijab is a contested matter in Islam, not necessarily welcome by many women in Islam.
But we don't hear that.
We don't hear that. And then you come to this story of the attack on the bus in Kenya and Muslims refusing to out Christians, which to me, so the response is a really significant part of this story that really defines who we are moving forward.
Yeah, I think the governor in South Carolina talked about the response, which was very different in South Carolina than it was in other parts of the United States to the violence. And,
right.
And so, on the one hand, we see this isolationist way of dealing, and yet in some places people have been able to come together and say, we are going to say something different.
When you see religion, this is top 10 religious stories. You see religion get associated with the violence, but you also see religion get associated with driving the "let's not be isolated" response.
Right. Exactly.
Peruse the pages of Christian Century. You'll see story after story of rejecting this turn towards isolation, of rejecting this turn towards exclusion.
And it's becoming countercultural.
Right.
In that sense. Right. Okay. Top story number 3.
I sometimes combine multiple stories and things, as you've seen. The papal encyclical on climate change in June, followed by the Paris Agreement in December.
What significance for you did that make for you as someone who might be concerned about, or someone who's not concerned, for those people who are not concerned about climate change, etc. What is this saying?
I don't know what to say to those people who are not concerned about climate change. It seems to me, maybe my entire theme is pushing back against pessimism. It's a tremendous moment of cooperation. Okay. At the end of the day, when it comes to the agreement in Paris, ultimately, the proof's in the pudding. Or show me the money, whatever you want to say, whatever some kind of, will something practical come out of it? Will something real come out of it or not? And I'm sure I haven't gone searching for skeptics. I assume it wouldn't be hard to find them. But, to me, the ability, the recognition of the need for cooperation, the ability to talk together, to say something constructive together, to actually come up with an agreement that would, at least claim the allegiance of 200 or so leaders. To me, that's of such fundamental importance. And particularly when it comes to this event, to thinking about something that's not going to happen tomorrow or the next day. I mean, you're talking something that's unfortunately only decades down the road, but it's still something in future. It's still something I can forget about because my term ends in 4 years. If I'm not my term here.
Right, exactly.
But
and it says something about the concern about the future
right.
of other human beings.
Right, right.
The children and grandchildren of the people, of these decision makers, and those of us who live today.
Right, right. And again, it's a religious story. You have the Pope, and you have the Pope pointing out that this is a matter of economic justice as well, for the poorer people who are going to be more adversely affected by this. And I think, and again, you have the ELCA following the Pope with a statement. The Pope is right to point this out. So it's a profound religious challenge. And
Okay. Well, religious story number 2.
Now I'm really cheating. I'm not really giving you an event. One thing that struck me, I looked at time and some other things as I was preparing for this.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And as I was going through time, just a snippet jumped out at me, a Pew report on the future of world religions' population growth projections.
Okay, could you share some of that report, or what made you focus on that, or look at that?
Well, it's certainly coheres to the extent that my theme is life together. It certainly underlines the importance of life together. I can give you a few things that they found. By the year 2050, the number of Muslims in the world will be nearly equal to the number of Christians. Atheists, agnostics, and others who do not affiliate with any religion, the nones,
right,
will increase in countries such as the United States as France, but will make up a declining share of the world's total population.
Oh.
In Europe, Muslims will make up 10% of the overall population. Again, this is by 2050. In the United States, Christians will decline from 3/4 to 2/3 of the population. Judaism will no longer be the second largest religion, but Islam. 4 out of every 10 Christians will live in sub-Saharan Africa. A lot will change.
Very much so. Very much so.
By 2050. So those numbers jumped out at me.
Very much so, and puts a challenge to all of us in denominations.
Right.
How do we look at these statistics and this how do we counter declines in numbers?
Yeah.
How do we how do we live with each other in the midst of
that? For me, is more the story. Certainly in the United States, there's an importance of Christians pushing back against secularism.
Yes, very much so.
Against the nuns, not in any sort of mean-spirited way, but as Christians pushing back against that. At the same time, you're not looking at an overall decline in Christianity in the world, which is...
Right.
I think some of us, it's maybe easy.
The demographics change.
Yeah.
That's what the report is indicating to us.
I mean, I think the issue of life together again, and particularly when I'd say the issue of life together on a global scale.
Yeah.
If you're looking at equal Christian and Muslim populations, obviously there's an enormous Hindu population and others as well. That issue of life together on a global scale, and that issue of life together as the demographics in Europe change, or in the United States change.
Very much so.
There are many in Europe who want to unring the bell, but it won't happen.
Right.
It will not happen, and they will have to find a better way, and we will have to find a better way.
Very much so. Very much so. Living together. And the number one story for you?
For me, the number one story this year, it's just the story that really grips me, is the refugee crisis. It's been going... Refugee crises, because I refer not only to the refugees coming out of Syria into Europe, but also the continuing flow of people from Central South America, Mexico, into the United States. I think, to me, that's sort of the number one religious story of the year, if you want to say. And you see, in December, Elizabeth Eaton visited a refugee camp, and she visited an immigration court in Chicago.
Right.
These are just dominant. These are just fundamental issues facing all religions.
Right, and the presence of the presiding bishop of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America says that this is an issue that we must confront and deal with as a denomination, or as all Christians have to deal with the other, and
right.
those who come who are hurt and poor and impoverished and separated from families. What can we say, and how can we assist them?
Right. It's what we were talking about earlier. This sort of, in so many ways, so many of the important decisions we have to make. Are we going to be open? Are we going to say welcome? Come into the country. Are we going to say welcome? Come into the church doors.
Exactly.
Or are you going to close the doors? And the fear of what might happen, one person might get through our immigration system and cause harm. The fear of what might happen, can...
Again, to counter the fear tactics that many people are espousing, to say, no, we are a community that welcomes a stranger.
Right, exactly.
And that is certainly different than some of the rhetoric we hear.
Right.
Right. The church has another word.
Right. But I mean, some of the rhetoric we hear, in ways, it appeals to Christianity.
Yeah.
And that has to be confronted.
Very much so.
With a Christianity that is welcoming.
Indeed. Well, I want to thank you for sharing with us your 10 top stories in religion.
Of course.
Great. I've been talking with Dr. Vincent Evener, who is the visiting instructor in Reformation and Lutheran Studies at the Lutheran Theological Seminary here at Gettysburg. For the Seminary Explorers, this is Nelson Strobert. Have a good day.
You have been listening to The Seminary Explorers from historic Seminary Ridge in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, a production of Gettysburg Seminary. We invite you to visit our website at www.ltsg.edu. Opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Gettysburg Seminary or the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America.